Hello, this is Mandar Kulkarni, and I welcome you all to the Agile Planet podcast. Let us start with today's episode.
Welcome to another episode of the Agile Planet. Thank you for joining me. Today, my guest is Vinaya Muralidharan. Vinaya works as a senior Agile coach in Pune, India. I really want to thank her for being a guest on this podcast. Vinaya, welcome to our podcast and thanks a lot for joining us. I would really like you to give a little introduction of your overall career so that we can get started from there.
Sure, Mandar. Thank you so much for inviting me. I think it's wonderful what you're doing with the Agile Planet, and I'm very happy to be a part of one of your podcasts. So, my name is Vinaya. Thank you for introducing me briefly, Mandar. Let me talk a bit about my career graph. So, I started, it's been a while since I've been in the IT industry. It's nearly 2 decades now. And I started with development and delivery roles, but I soon found my passion, about 10 years ago in the coaching arena. And my introduction to coaching was actually through the theory of constraints. So I was part of an organization which was doing a big theory of constraints implementation. And they needed coaches, people who would help others adopt those ways of working, etc. And they were looking for internal people to move over. So I really found my calling with that. And after that, it's been a series of a variety of ways of being leaner and agile at the workplace. So it's been the theory of constraints, large scale Kanban, Scrum, SAFe, a little bit of disciplined agile. And ultimately, what we're doing lately in my current organization is taking a very framework agnostic approach to agility. So that's a bit of what my career has looked like. And outside of work, of course, these kinds of community connects, speaking at conferences, blogging, all of those things, are another avenue for my passion for agility. So that's
Great summary, and we have so many things to talk about in this discussion. So I'm very curious about the latest work that you mentioned, which is framework agnostic approach to agility. And in your previous career, you have worked with various frameworks, and now you are going with a framework agnostic approach. So it's a very interesting journey. I'm sure you must be also having that kind of a feeling. So a little bit, give us the idea about this framework agnostic approach, how it started, what you have learned, and what's your own learning out of this approach.
Yes, so I would agree with you that, it's really interesting after having worked with a lot of frameworks. Loosely, I would say, I've not been a part of a large adaptation, transformation where we've been very keen on checking every box of a framework, but still, this approach has been really left of field. So our whole thinking behind this was just like product development and solutioning is an extremely complex space. And there's a big degree of discovery. You cannot know things in advance, right? You have to learn by doing. Similarly, agile transformations, especially for large enterprises, is a very complex undertaking. There are just too many variables, too many things that shift all the time, etc. So we felt that there was no way we could have a framework which could tell us in advance that these are the things for us to do in order to be more agile. So we wanted to have a very emergent and discovery based approach to the transformation itself. And that's why we said that, while we have the knowledge of several frameworks and we will leverage that, we will not attach ourselves to any one particular framework. We will pick and choose the right responses at the right time based on the cues that we see on the ground. So that's how we've had a very emergent approach to agility. And that's why we are framework agnostic. We are not attached to any one framework. But of course, if you look at myself, the coaches that I work with, we all have a lot of knowledge, experience, expertise in a variety of frameworks. So do we bring that knowledge to the table? Absolutely, yes. But we are not very attached to any one guide, any one framework. That's what we are trying. And it's been a lot of fun so far. So in terms of learning for me, I think it really challenges me as a coach because there is nothing I can just refer. I can't say, oh, I look at the Scrum guide and I know I need to do this next, right? So I think it really challenges me as a coach to apply myself, to be very context sensitive all the time. So I think I've grown a lot in the last few years as I've taken this approach. So it's been very, very exciting.
Okay. Yeah. So when I hear about this framework agnostic approach, naturally all yours and your colleague coaches experiences and understanding about other frameworks definitely come in picture. But one question that came to my mind, that when you are going with this approach and you are pick and choose depending on the project that you want to work on, what are some of the key criteria you use, that if this is a project, then this kind of a philosophy I will use. I will refrain from using the word framework, but is there any kind of I would say not a template, but a kind of a guidelines that you use while choosing the right amount of right type of philosophy?
That's a really good question, Mandar. So I would say that our first interactions with a group that we are starting to coach is very focused on discovering their current ways of working, their history, their legacy, and there are two reasons for us to do it. One, we want to understand the context so that we can respond to the context. But second, I think from a change management perspective, and I believe in this very strongly, is that we want to be very respectful of their journey so far, because these are usually successful groups. They are not, it's not that they don't know how to do the work and we're going to come and, wave this magic wand and change things for them. So, at least to me, I think it's just we want to meet them on an equal footing. We want to be respectful of what they've done so far. We want to be cognizant of the things that they're very good at and that work, so that we can weave that into the way we do the transformation with them, right? So discovery, I would say, is a big activity that influences what we do next with them. Now, we find that for many of the teams that are starting from either a very organized way of working in the past, very process oriented, etc., sometimes having slightly more frameworky items helps them, right? Having time boxes helps them. Laying out certain principles right up front helps them make the transition. So in those places, we may do that. There are other teams that are starting afresh. Over there, we can go a little more, free thinking and allow them to craft their own rules right off the bat. So I would say that the context really influences a lot of what we do. And the individuals that are a part of those groups influence their experience to a great extent. So it really is a very, very collaborative effort. That said, there are some fundamentals that always stay, right? Small batches always seem to help. Having lighter processes always seems to help. Having smaller teams seems to help. Relying on networks seems to help. So there are some of these elements that are just so fundamental to the idea of agility that they make an appearance, almost with every group that we engage with.
I agree. And now, when you are saying that you depend or you build upon the experiences what the team has already done, that's naturally allows you to really get a good footing, good starting point. But the question is, when the teams are new in general to agility, do you do you believe that they need to be trained formally in at least some fundamental principles of Agile? And if so, how do you go about it? Do you insist on training it yourself? Do you insist on bringing outside trainers? Do you insist on getting basic certifications like CSM or something like that? What's your approach towards preparing or getting ready the team when they are new?
Again, a good question. So, I would say that as far as the training is concerned, we do have trainings, and we are usually looking at a basic understanding of what it means to be agile. And over here, I like to talk about agility more than, agile with a capital A. So we
Mhm.
talk about the manifesto, we talk about the values, the principles, but I also like to start with why do we need agility, right? The whole idea of working in complex adaptive systems
Yeah.
demands agility as a response, right? And then what does it mean to be agile is, you want to do the right thing, create great
Mhm.
products, but you also want to do it the right way with very sound engineering. But you
Yeah.
want to do all this really fast because you need tight feedback loops, and you want to do all of these things over and over again because this product development which takes years, and products live for many years typically. So
Correct.
talking about what it means to be agile is a really important starting point, because otherwise at least in my experience, people get sucked into the rules a little too much and
Mhm.
lose sight of the fact that we are not trying to be compliant to something, right? We're not trying to say that, hey, I need this label of agile, and if I do this, I become agile. I genuinely need agility, and it is not even because we want bragging rights. It's because there is no other way businesses can be successful in today's environment,
Mhm.
right? So I like to start there. So our training, that's it. We typically do it internally. For our coaches, we see it as a tool of relation building as well, with the people
Mhm.
that we're going to coach. So from that perspective, getting external trainers robs us of that opportunity to some extent. At the same time, there could be certain areas of expertise where we feel, hey, if we had this great, trainer from outside come in and help us, that would be wonderful, right? So we
Mhm.
do, it's more of a pick and choose, but most of the times, the basic agile introduction overview, why we need agile, is something coaches do. And we use that as a way to, establish some relationship and connection with the people we are going to coach.
Mhm.
And in terms of certifications, we don't insist on any certifications. Most of the times, we recommend a lot of books, some great blogs, good people to follow, bloggers and others. That sort of thing has been more our avenue to train people up and give
Mhm.
them avenues for self training. So we've
Mhm.
taken that route more than the certifications. There are
Mhm.
people who find the discipline of studying for a certification and the sense of accomplishment that comes from a certification good for them, and we encourage them to do that. But as a group that is doing the transformation, certification is not something that we look at in a big way.
Okay, okay, okay. So your approach is kind of open. Those who are interested in certifications, they can go ahead with. If not, you are okay with that. Okay, great. Yeah, because in my experience, training and certification in helps in such a way that at least because the organization says that we need these kind of trainings and certifications, people take time out. Otherwise, in day to day tyranny of urgent, as we call it, people hardly find any time. On top of that, the personal commitments and personal lives. So I was looking at it from that perspective. But yeah, of course, if this approach has worked for you, uh, that there is nothing to challenge about it. Great. So let's go back to the initial part of your career where you described that you started as in a project where you started implementing theory of constraints, and perhaps you are the only coach or expert whom I have talked to until now who has done formal implementation of theory of constraints. So just give us a little bit introduction of theory of constraint, what it is, how it helps, and then when you are now working with Agile, how theory of constraint and Agile works or relates to each other.
Okay, all right. So yes, I think that was really opportune that I was in that organization and they were looking for coaches and I could shift over because I think that's influenced my thinking towards Agile to a great extent.
Mm-hmm.
So the theory of constraints, of course, was introduced by Dr. Eliyahu Goldratt through his book. It's a seminal piece of work called The Goal. It was back in the 80s, if I'm not mistaken. And the writing style is great. It's written like a novel, so it's very easy to read. I know of so many people who are not from the coaching field, or, that sort of thing, but it's a business, Bible sort of thing. Many people have read The Goal. And he's written it in a way that it's so easy to read, right? So what the theory of constraints says, very briefly, is that any system is constrained by a handful of constraints which prevent that system from reaching its potential or reaching the goals that it needs to, right?
Okay.
So at any given stage, you look at a system, you will be able to find the top few constraints which we need to focus on. Once we start relieving those constraints, the performance, the throughput, etc., starts improving. And then it exposes the next set of constraints that you need to go work on in order to further improve the throughput. So the theory or the hypothesis is that any system always has constraints. Even after you solve the first few constraints, the next ones emerge. So, you'll have to go and look at the next constraints. And the other philosophy that it's based on is that, the chain is as strong as its weakest link. So there's no point in trying to make improvements across the board, all across the system, because your weakest link is going to determine how fast or how well you can do always. So it's better to really focus your attention and your efforts on the weakest link and help that space instead of making improvements all around, at the beginning. So it's about whether we do local optimization, each of us looks at our local area, starts optimizing it, or do we look at global optimization and say that this is where the problems are, or this is where the challenges are. Let's go, pay attention over there. So that very briefly, that's what the theory of constraints is. And a very good manifestation of this, if any of your audience would like to explore further on their own, is the theory of constraints talks about 5 focusing steps, which is basically how do you identify a constraint? What do you do with it? You have to ensure that you have a constraint. So you should optimize the constraint first. Ensure that the constraint is well utilized, right? So if I have a team that is usually where the bottlenecks are, I have to ensure a smooth flow of work to that team, right? I don't want to starve them of work for some time and suddenly load them with work. After that, I want to see how the rest of the system is subordinated to the constraint. Because the constraint is what is really slowing us down, every other area of the system should ensure that this constraint is well supported, right? Because that's where our attention is needed. And finally, you look at how do you relieve the constraint? Can you add more capacity? Can you do some automation? How do you speed up, make the constraint not a constraint anymore? And then you go find your next constraint. So the 5 focusing steps are really interesting because my first reaction, at least I think intuitively, is to say, I have a constraint, I'll add more capacity or I'll automate or whatever and relieve the constraint, right? So there are these other steps that really make you think that, okay, with the current system, what do I need to do differently given that we've identified a constraint? So, interesting stuff to explore on your own if you find it.
Absolutely. You gave a really great premiere to start with because sometime back when I was working in typical waterfall style project management, theory of constraint was kind of a one-liner, two-liner introduction to me, but I have never gone into the details of understanding it. Your explanation gave me an opportunity to peek into it, and certainly it has intrigued my curiosity, I will definitely try and go and read this book of Theory of Constraints. Great. Yeah. But again, the remaining part of my question is, how do you think theory of constraint relates to agility or agile uh, mindset, framework, process, whatever you want to call it?
Yes, so I think so. TOC, Lean, all of these are very, very fundamental sort of bodies of work, I would say. And having knowledge of these can really help you stay focused on the fundamentals, right? Sometimes we tend to get distracted, me included, with all these new buzzwords. There's constantly something that you're bombarded with, and all of it is great, but many of them are really derived works from, I would say, a slightly more fundamental science, right? So I would say that the theory of constraints from that perspective is a very fundamental sort of approach to how do we make a system go faster. And given that fast feedback loops are such a core idea for agility, right? That's what helps us be faster by having a quick inspect and adapt cycle. So, from that perspective, I think the theory of constraints really helps us say that, let's do things like value stream mapping. Let's identify our bottlenecks. Let's focus our efforts over there, because everything else we do will be thwarted by these places where the bottlenecks are. So it really helped me be biased towards taking a systemic view rather than taking very localized views. So I think that's an influence that has stayed with me in a big way from that perspective. um, and the goal is something I read from time to time, because you tend to get sucked into your day-to-day routine, you forget. So and thankfully it's easy to read, so it's easy to go refer back to, and all of that. So I think from that perspective, it really helps you stay focused on what really matters. um, and that then gets woven into agile in a very easy way, right? It helps you
Okay.
focus your efforts and helps you speed things up and have tighter feedback loops.
Absolutely. Yeah. This makes really perfect sense of what you have explained. So let's segue to other frameworks that you have worked on, and you have worked on SAFe, you have worked on Disciplined Agile, all those things. Give us your insights about these frameworks, and how do you think they are helpful, they are useful, which situations, whatever you have learned out of these frameworks.
Sure. So let me start with SAFe because it was earlier in my career. So I think when I saw SAFe, and I actually attended a session from Dean Leffingwell in Agile India conference, I think it was back in 2015. I think the SAFe folks have done a really good job of collating a lot of good thoughts, good approaches, and the fact that they've made it available. It's like a reference guide, right? That you can go, and they've made it really available. I think the research work is really solid, and it's been made very accessible. It's very well documented, and I think they've relied a lot on the principles of product development flow by Donald Reinertsen, which I love. I think that's again another fundamental piece of work. So from that perspective, I think SAFe has done a really good job of collating great thoughts in one place. I find it a little complicated as a framework, to be honest. It's large. It details out many things. So I think if I take it for implementation as such, without applying certain filters and saying that these parts can wait for my organization, maybe I'll just start. I like this idea. I'll just do some of these things. Then I find it a little, maybe it's laid out too much details. That said, I must say, I know that SAFe is extremely popular in the industry, right? And I see why. I think it's a very easy transition for large enterprises from the way they are set up, from the way they operate, to start having some degree of agility. So I think it gives them that, it's like this decoder ring between waterfall and agile. And that's where its real appeal lies. So it shows senior management folks a way to understand agility through a lens that they are very familiar with. So
Correct.
I see that it is extremely successful. I fully understand why. Would I be very excited about doing a full safe implementation? I think I would rather cherry pick a bit, but I think they're a big commercial success. I mean, we have to acknowledge that they've done
Yeah,
a wonderful job of being a commercial success. So
sure.
that's my take on safe. And disciplined agile, again, when I started out, I thought it's going to be something like safe. But I read the book. I did the first certification where you just need to read the book and take a test. So again, I think they've done a really good job of collating various approaches to agility,
Yeah.
and it's like a ready reckoner, right?
Mm.
So right now I'm dealing with a challenge where we're trying to figure out how to do modeling for a really complex product in a more agile way. And my first thought was I should read what they've written about it, in the book of Disciplined Agile. So I think, again, it shows a lot of industry experience. It's very pragmatic, and
Yeah.
it gives you, it's like a decision framework, right? I really love that idea of being a decision framework and not trying to say, hey, if this, then you do, you always do
Right.
this. So from that perspective, I think, again, a great collation of good, successful approaches.
Perfect. So all this wide experience of various frameworks, TOC, SAFe, Disciplined Agile must have helped you a lot in your development, your growth as a coach. And using a cue from there, I'm coming to a very intriguing point that I read in your resume, that you have mentioned something like coach the coach. And I'm really interested in learning more from you about it. So tell us more.
Okay. So I have actually led teams of coaches for a while now. I think around 4 to 5 years. I've always had coaches reporting into me while I myself am also coaching other teams, etc. So I think um, coaches understand what coaching is, right? So in order to coach a coach, you have to be really good at the whole coaching skill. So I think it is something that has further developed my coaching skills, having coaches reporting to me, having to coach them, etc. So I think it really demands a certain approach, which with delivery folks, etc. They expect a little bit of training. They want sometimes, at least in the beginning, hey, just give us the solution, tell us what to do, right? With coaches, it is never that. These are usually very smart people, very evolved. They themselves are coaching others, so they understand the whole idea of asking questions, understanding that people being coached already have the answers. Your job is to surface it. So coaching them in turn, I think, has really elevated my coaching game. I also find that there is a certain personality type that seems to get attracted to coaching, and they're really difficult to convince. They are sometimes very difficult to sort of help them see a different way, which is very paradoxical because I have come across several coaches who are very closed to new ideas, and because they come with a lot of expertise and experience themselves. So from that perspective, while we are able to coach others and say that, hey, you should be on a learning journey all the time, it's very difficult ourselves to do it. So from those perspectives, I think it's been a challenging but very elevating sort of role that I've had to.
Yeah, it's a very good observation that coaches themselves may not be open as they expect others to do. It's like eating your own dog food, as they call it.
Absolutely.
Okay, while wrapping up, I want to definitely ask you about your community connect, community involvement. You mentioned about conferences, you mentioned about blogs. So tell us more about it. What are your passionate areas? What you like to write? What you like to speak? What other things you do? and that is very interesting part of your entire career and work.
Sure. Thank you so much, Mandar. So in terms of the community connect, it's been, I think, 5 or 6 years since I've started participating and, contributing to conferences. The first one I did was a local conference in Pune, and we were so excited. One of my friends and I did that. And, we wanted to go all out. It was the first time we were going to present anything at a conference. So we actually had hand-drawn images for all our slides, and we'd created a character through which we were telling our story. And also, we really had a lot of fun with it. And since then, there's been no looking back. I had such a good time doing that.
Yeah.
That I've always enjoyed sharing, my experiences and, whatever I think is worth sharing with a larger community. I think one of the reasons for me to do it is, again, when you have to go and address a room full of people who know their craft, and you're trying to share your experiences, your ideas and concepts with them, you really have to do your homework well. So it's something that really encourages me to sharpen, my messaging and everything. So I love doing that. And I have learned a lot by going to conferences, listening to other people, what they are trying in their organization. So I just want to be able to give back in a very small way as well to the community. So that's one. The other thing, my blogs, I think I'm very inconsistent. I write, maybe there are 3 months where I'm publishing 3 blogs, and then there's a year where there's nothing. But I enjoy writing. I'm not very good at it, but I enjoy it. So I'm guessing that it's more for myself than for others. But it's mostly about agile related topics. I try to keep it short, and just hope to convey a very small, simple message through my blogs. There's that. And then my other passion, and I'm able to, I find that I have more platforms to be able to contribute now, is women in leadership, women in technology, that sort of stream. So at work, I lead the Women in Technology sort of chapter for us. Outside as well, I'm finding more and more places where there are people with similar interests who are doing a lot of great work. So I'm volunteering some of my time to go help out over there. So I really am passionate about it, because after all these years, we still have very, very low representation of women in STEM and in tech spaces. So I think that needs attention. And, by extension also, I am an ally for some of the other communities like LGBTQ plus and other communities at work. And again, I think we are in 2021. Diversity and inclusion should have been a given by now. It is not. So whatever we can do, whatever little we can do, I hope will start moving the needle in the right direction.
Great. Wow, Vinaya, it has been such a pleasure in listening to all these things that you shared with us. I want to really thank you for that. I'm sure all my audience of this podcast will enjoy this interview with you. And I really want to wish you best of luck for all your future ventures, future roles, and your role as an agile coach, as well as various active roles in the community. With that, let's wrap it up. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Mandar. Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time talking to you.
Hope you enjoyed this episode. Please like, share, and subscribe to this podcast and to this YouTube channel. Thank you.